My parents called off my 18th birthday party because my sister was having a hard time. I remember the exact moment the words hit me, standing in the kitchen with the afternoon sun slanting through the blinds, casting striped shadows on the granite countertop where I'd just set down my backpack from school. The kind of ordinary Friday that smelled like the faint lemon of Mom's cleaning spree and the lingering coffee from Dad's morning brew in the Keurig. My phone buzzing with texts from friends about the party outfits they were picking out for tomorrow, the excitement building like a balloon about to burst. But then Mom looked up from chopping vegetables for dinner, her knife pausing mid-slice on a carrot, and said it so casually, as if she were mentioning we'd run out of milk. "Honey, we've decided to call off your birthday party." And I laughed at first, thinking it was some weird joke. Because how could they, after weeks of planning? The invitations sent via group chat, the cake ordered from that little bakery downtown with the chocolate ganache I loved, the playlist I'd curated on Spotify with all the hits from senior year. But her face didn't crack. It stayed soft and sorry, the way it does when she's delivering bad news about a relative's health or a canceled vacation. And Dad, who was scrolling through his work emails on his laptop at the island, nodded without looking up, murmuring, "Your sister's been having a really hard time lately, and we think it's best to keep things low-key." And that's when the air punched out of me, my chest tightening like someone had wrapped it in rubber bands, because Emily, my 14-year-old sister, always having a hard time, her moods swinging like the old tire swing in the backyard that no one used anymore, ever since she started high school and the bullying whispers followed her home, the mean girls in her grade mocking her for her braces or her quiet way of eating lunch alone. And I'd tried to help, offering to drive her to school in my beat-up Honda or sharing my makeup tips, but she pushed me away, locking herself in her room with her headphones on, blasting that sad indie music that made the walls thrum faintly. And now this, my milestone, my 18th birthday, the one I dreamed about since I was little, picturing the backyard strung with fairy lights, friends laughing around the fire pit, maybe even sneaking a bitter or two under the stars, all of it evaporating because of her hard time. And I felt the heat rising in my face, the betrayal sharp as a paper cut. "What do you mean, call it off? It's tomorrow. People are coming," I snapped, my voice higher than I intended, and Mom set the knife down, wiping her hands on her apron, that floral one she got from Aunt Linda last Christmas, coming around the counter to touch my arm, but I jerked back, the touch feeling like pity, not love. "Alex, please understand. Emily's therapist said we need to avoid big gatherings right now. She's been struggling with anxiety, and a party might overwhelm her." And Dad, who finally looked up, his glasses slipping down his nose, pushing them back with that tired sigh he does after long days at the accounting firm. "It's not forever, kiddo. We can reschedule or do something small, just family." But that word, family, twisted in my gut. Because what about me? Wasn't I family too? Didn't my feelings count in this equation? The one where Emily's pain always trumped everything? Like the time we skipped my soccer championship because she had a meltdown over a bad grade, or when Christmas morning was hushed and tense because she didn't like her gifts. And I stood there, the kitchen suddenly too small, the clock ticking on the wall like a countdown to my unraveling, tears pricking my eyes, hot and unwelcome. "This is bullshit," I muttered, grabbing my backpack and storming upstairs, past Emily's closed door where I could hear the faint murmur of her video call with her online friends, the ones she preferred over real life, slamming my own door hard enough to rattle the pictures in the hallway, the family portraits from better days, all smiles and matching outfits at the beach, and I collapsed on my bed, the comforter bunching under me, pulling out my phone to text my best friend Mia, fingers flying over the screen. Party's off, parents suck. But even as I hit send, the anger mixed with something deeper, a hollow ache, because I knew Emily was hurting. I'd seen the dark circles under her eyes at breakfast, the way she picked at her cereal without eating, her laughs rare and forced, and part of me felt guilty for resenting her, for wishing just once that my needs came first. But the pain was raw, slicing through the excitement I'd built like a fragile tower, now crumbling, and I buried my face in my pillow, muffling the sobs that came unbidden, the house quiet, except for the distant clatter of Mom resuming dinner prep, as if nothing had shattered. But inside me, everything had, the betrayal fresh and festering, wondering how we'd ever pretend to be a family after this. The rain starting to patter against my window like sympathetic tears, the world outside blurring into gray, matching the storm brewing in my heart. And I lay there for hours, scrolling mindlessly through social media, seeing other people's perfect lives, their birthday posts with cakes and confetti, feeling more alone in my own home, the place that was supposed to be safe, but now felt like a battlefield where I was the collateral damage, Emily's hard time, the weapon that pierced right through my dreams. And as night fell, the streetlights flickering on outside, I heard a soft knock on my door, Mom's voice tentative. "Alex, dinner's ready." But I didn't move. didn't answer, letting the silence speak for me. The hurt too big to swallow with the lasagna she'd made. My favorite, probably as some half-hearted apology, but it wasn't enough. Not tonight, not when the wound was still bleeding, and I wondered if they'd even notice if I skipped it, if my absence would register in their Emily-centered world. The clock on my nightstand glowing 7:15, time stretching like taffy, sticky and endless. My mind replaying the scene over and over, the casual dismissal, the nod from Dad, the pity in Mom's eyes. And beneath the anger, a sliver of fear crept in. Fear that this was how it would always be. Me sidelined for her sake, my milestones muted, my voice drowned out by her silence. And as I finally drifted into a fitful sleep, phone clutched in my hand, notifications lighting up with confused messages from friends, I felt the first cracks in the foundation of what I thought family meant, raw and exposed, the pain settling in like an unwelcome guest, one that might stay far longer than any party ever could. That first night after the announcement stretched like wet cement, slow and heavy, every minute sticking to my skin as I lay on my bed staring at the ceiling fan spinning lazy circles, the blades cutting through the dim glow from my desk lamp because I couldn't bear turning on the overhead light and seeing my reflection in the mirror across the room. The same mirror where I'd practiced smiling for tomorrow's photos that would never happen. And downstairs, the house made its usual nighttime sounds, the dishwasher humming through its cycle, Dad's footsteps creaking on the hardwood as he locked the front door, Mom's voice low and murmuring something I couldn't catch, probably checking on Emily again. Always Emily. And I kept replaying her face from earlier, the way her eyes had gone glassy when Mom mentioned the therapist's recommendation, how she'd nodded once, small and defeated, then disappeared upstairs without a word to me, not even a sorry, not even a glance. And the silence between us felt thicker than the walls separating our rooms, thicker than the years that had once made us allies against Dad's bad jokes or Mom's overpacked lunches. I hadn't gone down for dinner. The smell of lasagna had drifted up the stairs like an apology I refused to accept, and eventually the plate sat cooling outside my door until Mom quietly retrieved it, her soft knock unanswered, her sigh audible through the wood before her footsteps retreated. And part of me wanted to fling the door open and scream that I wasn't the one who needed protecting, that I was the one bleeding out here, but the words stayed lodged in my throat, turning sour. Around 11, I heard Emily's door open, the faint click of her light switch, then the shuffle of slippers down the hall to the bathroom. Water running, toilet flushing, the whole mundane ritual that used to feel comforting when we were younger, and she'd knock on my door afterward to borrow my phone charger or show me a funny meme. But tonight, the sounds felt alien, like they belonged to someone else's sister. And when she passed my room again, I held my breath, waiting for her to pause, to knock, to say anything at all. But she didn't, just kept walking, door closing softly behind her, and the disappointment hit harder than I expected. A fresh wave that left me curling tighter under the comforter, knees to chest, phone screen lighting my face as I scrolled through the group chat where friends were still sending party memes and outfit polls, oblivious, their excitement and knife twisting every time a new message popped up. I typed and deleted a dozen explanations. Parents bailed because of M. Parties canceled, long story. Sorry, guys. But nothing felt right. Nothing captured the ache without sounding petty or cruel. So I left them unread, the guilt compounding because now I was letting them down too. And eventually I turned the phone face down on the nightstand, the vibration of incoming texts buzzing against the wood like distant thunder. Sleep wouldn't come. Instead, memories kept surfacing, uninvited. Emily at 10, crying because a boy called her weird at recess. Me marching over to the playground the next day to glare until he apologized. The two of us building blanket forts in the living room during power outages, whispering secrets until dawn. The way she used to crawl into my bed after nightmares, small and warm, trusting me to keep the dark away. And now that trust felt fractured, redirected toward her phone screen, her online friends who didn't see the braces or the quiet, who didn't require her to perform normalcy. Around 2 in the morning, I heard footsteps again, heavier this time, Dad's, and then the low rumble of voices from the master bedroom down the hall, Mom's tone sharp with exhaustion, Dad's measured and placating, fragments drifting under my door. She's hurting too. We can't keep doing this. Emily needs stability right now. And I pressed my ear to the wall, heart pounding, catching just enough to confirm what I already knew. They were talking about me in the third person, weighing my pain against hers like it was a math problem with only one right answer. The argument didn't escalate, just faded into murmurs, then silence, and I rolled onto my back, tears slipping sideways into my hair, wondering when exactly I'd become the variable they could subtract to make the equation balance. By 4, the house was completely still, except for the refrigerator's occasional sigh, and I finally got up, padding barefoot to the window, pushing the curtain aside to watch rain streak the glass, streetlights smearing gold across wet pavement. And for a moment I imagined running out into it, soaked and furious, disappearing into the night where no one could prioritize anyone else over me. But the thought dissolved as quickly as it came. I had nowhere to go, no car keys I'd dare take, no plan beyond the hollow wish to be seen. Back in bed, I pulled the extra pillow over my face, muffling the sobs that finally broke free, raw and ragged, the kind that hurt your ribs. And when they subsided, I felt emptied, not better, just lighter, in the way a cracked glass is lighter before it shatters completely. Dawn crept in gray and reluctant, the first birds starting their hesitant calls, and I lay there, listening, eyes burning, knowing the confrontation was postponed, that breakfast would force us into the same kitchen, the same table, the same careful dance around the wreckage of yesterday, and I wasn't ready, not even close. But the clock on my phone read 6:03, another day starting whether I wanted it to or not, and somewhere down the hall, Emily was probably waking up too, carrying her own invisible weight, and for the first time since the announcement, I allowed myself to wonder, not with anger, but with a tired curiosity, what it felt like to be the sister whose hard time was always the reason the house held its breath. The question didn't erase the hurt, didn't soften the edges, but it lodged there quietly, a small crack in the wall of my resentment, letting in the faintest draft of something that might, someday, become understanding, though right then it only made the loneliness sharper, more precise, like a needle threading through every heartbeat as the house slowly awoke around me. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of pale, washed-out light that follows a night of rain, the backyard grass still glistening, the air heavy with damp earth, and the faint, metallic scent of wet pavement drifting through the cracked window in my room, and I stayed in bed longer than usual, listening to the house wake up in stages. The coffee maker gurgling downstairs, Mom's slippers shuffling across the kitchen tile, Dad clearing his throat as he opened the newspaper app on his tablet, the small domestic symphony that used to feel like safety, but now sounded rehearsed, careful, like everyone was tiptoeing around broken glass. Eventually, hunger forced me down, my stomach hollow and protesting after skipping dinner, so I pulled on yesterday's hoodie, the sleeves still carrying the faint trace of yesterday's perfume I'd spritzed in excitement for a party that never came, and padded barefoot to the kitchen, steeling myself for the sight of them. Mom was at the stove scrambling eggs, her hair pulled into a messy bun with strands escaping, the way it always did on weekends, and Dad sat at the table scrolling emails, his reading glasses perched low. But Emily was already there, hunched over a bowl of cereal she wasn't eating, spoon tracing slow circles in the milk, her phone face down beside her plate like a sleeping animal. When I walked in, she glanced up, quick and guilty, then dropped her eyes again, and that single look cracked something open in me. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a recognition that she wasn't oblivious, that she knew exactly what she'd cost me, even if she couldn't say it out loud. I poured myself coffee from the pot, added too much creamer, the way I always did when I needed comfort, and sat across from her without speaking, the chair scraping louder than necessary against the floor. Mom turned from the stove, relief flickering across her face like she'd been waiting for this moment to prove we could still function as a unit, and she slid a plate of eggs and toast in front of me, murmuring, "Morning, sweetheart," her voice soft, tentative, the same tone she used when one of us was sick. I nodded, not trusting words yet, and picked at the food while the silence thickened, broken only by the clink of spoons and the distant hum of a neighbor's lawnmower starting up. After a few minutes, Dad cleared his throat again, set his tablet down, and said, "We should talk about yesterday." But before he could continue, Emily pushed her chair back abruptly, the legs screeching, and muttered, "I'm going back upstairs," her voice small, almost swallowed by the room. Mom reached out instinctively. "Em, honey, stay!" But Emily was already moving, shoulders rounded, disappearing up the stairs like smoke, and the door to her room closed with a soft finality that echoed louder than any slam. The kitchen felt suddenly colder, the eggs cooling on my plate, and I looked at my parents, really looked at them, Mom's hands twisting the dish towel, Dad rubbing the back of his neck the way he did when he was out of solutions, and for the first time I saw how tired they were, how the constant calibration between Emily's fragility and my anger had worn grooves into their faces. "She didn't mean for this to happen," Mom said quietly, sitting beside me, her chair close enough that our shoulders almost touched. "She's been having panic attacks at school, bad ones. The therapist thinks big changes or crowds set her off right now. We didn't want to risk her spiraling in front of everyone." I stared into my coffee, watching the creamer swirl into pale ribbons. "And I get no say? My birthday just gets erased because she might spiral?" The words came out sharper than I intended, but I didn't take them back. Dad leaned forward, elbows on the table. "We're not erasing you, Alex. We're trying to keep the family from breaking apart. Emily's struggling in a way we can't ignore anymore. But you're right, it's not fair. None of it is." The admission hung there, simple and honest, and it disarmed me just enough that the next breath came easier. I thought about the texts still unread on my phone, the friends who deserved better than ghosting, and said, "I need to tell people what happened. I'm not going to lie about why it was canceled." Mom nodded slowly. "Okay, but maybe don't make it about blaming Emily. Just say family stuff came up." I met her eyes, saw the plea there, not to protect Emily from the world, but to protect what was left of us from tearing wider. "I won't trash her," I said finally, "but I'm not pretending it didn't hurt." Dad exhaled, long and slow. "That's fair." We sat like that for a while, the three of us, in a fragile triangle, no one rushing to fill the quiet. Upstairs, I could hear Emily's music starting, low and muffled through the floor, the same playlist she'd been looping for weeks, and instead of resentment flaring, I felt a thin thread of curiosity pull taut. What was she hearing in those songs that she couldn't find in this house? After breakfast, I went to my room, closed the door, and finally opened the group chat, fingers hovering before typing the truth in pieces. Party's off because of a family emergency. Nothing dramatic, just need some space right now. Sorry for the late notice. Love you guys. Responses flooded in. Concern, offers to hang out anyway, memes to cheer me up, and I let the warmth of them seep in, a small counterweight to the heaviness downstairs. Later that afternoon, Mom knocked softly, holding a small bakery box she must have picked up on her way back from the pharmacy run. It's not the same, I know, she said, setting the single chocolate cupcake on my desk, the kind with the ganache swirl I'd wanted for the big cake. But it's yours. Happy belated 18th, in private. I stared at it, the candle already stuck in crookedly, and felt my throat close. She didn't wait for thanks, just squeezed my shoulder once and left. And when I finally lit the candle and made a wish, something vague about healing, about being heard, about not losing each other, I blew it out alone, the smoke curling toward the ceiling like a question mark. Down the hall, Emily's room stayed closed, but for the first time, I didn't resent the barrier. I saw it for what it was, a shield she needed, the same way I needed mine right now. The day passed in fragments, scrolling Netflix without watching, texting Mia long voice notes about how much it sucked, helping Dad carry groceries in from the car under a sky that threatened more rain. And through it all, I kept drawing boundaries in small, deliberate ways. I ate dinner at the table, but spoke only when spoken to. I didn't offer to help Emily with her math homework like I used to. I answered Mom's check-ins with short nods instead of the long rants I wanted to unleash. Each choice felt like laying bricks, building something sturdier than the old automatic closeness we'd taken for granted. And though the hurt still throbbed steady and low, like a bruise you keep pressing to test if it's healing, I sensed the first faint shift towards the possibility that protecting Emily didn't mean erasing myself entirely, that maybe there was room, however narrow, for both of us to breathe in the same house. By Sunday, the house felt like it was holding its breath. Every creak of the floorboards amplified, every door closing too loud in the quiet that had settled after Saturday's strained breakfast. And I woke early to the sound of rain tapping insistently against the roof again, the kind of steady drizzle that makes you want to stay under the covers forever. But I couldn't. My skin felt too tight, my thoughts too loud, replaying the cupcake Mom left on my desk, the half-eaten chocolate still sitting there like evidence of a failed peace offering. I needed air that didn't taste like guilt or compromise, so I texted Mia before the sun was fully up. Can I crash at your place tonight? Need out. Her reply came almost immediately, all caps and heart emojis. Yes, come now, bring snacks. And within an hour, I was packing an overnight bag with the essentials. Charger, hoodie, the journal I hadn't touched since junior year, a pair of jeans that still smelled faintly of the bonfire we'd had last summer when everything felt possible. Mom caught me in the hallway as I sipped the duffel, her arms crossed over her robe, eyebrows lifting in that quiet question she never needed words for. I'm going to Mia's for the night, I said, keeping my voice even, like I was announcing a study session instead of an escape. She searched my face for a long second, then nodded slowly. Okay, text me when you get there, and be safe. No lecture, no guilt trip about leaving Emily alone with her moods, just a tired acceptance that maybe space was the only thing left to offer right now. Dad was already gone for his early golf game with his work buddies, the one ritual he refused to cancel even when the rest of us were falling apart, so it was just Mom and me in the entryway, the rain drumming harder now. And for a moment, I almost asked if she was okay, if she ever got tired of being the buffer between Emily's storms and the rest of us, but the question stuck. Saying it out loud might make it too real. Instead, I hugged her quick, awkward, our shoulders bumping, and she held on a beat longer than usual before letting go. Emily's door stayed closed the whole time I was leaving. I paused outside it for half a second, listening for any sign she was awake, but there was only silence and the faint thump of bass from her speaker, so I kept walking. Down the stairs, out the front door, the screen door slapping shut behind me like punctuation. The drive to Mia's was 20 minutes of gray highway and NPR murmuring low on the radio, some segment about teen mental health that felt too on the nose, so I switched it off and let the windshield wipers set the rhythm instead. Mia's apartment was in the next suburb over, a converted attic above her mom's garage that smelled like vanilla candles and the Thai takeout they ordered every Friday. She met me at the door with open arms and no questions, just pulled me inside, handed me fuzzy socks and a mug of hot chocolate spiked with peppermint schnapps she swore was medicinal, and we sank onto her thrift store couch under a blanket that had seen better decades. For the first time in days, I talked without editing, about the canceled party, the way Emily's eyes slid away from mine at breakfast, how Mom's cupcake felt like both an apology and a bribe, how Dad's calm reasonableness sometimes made me want to scream because it meant he'd already decided whose pain mattered more. Mia listened, nodding, passing tissues when my voice cracked, and when I ran out of words, she said simply, "You're allowed to be pissed. You don't have to be the bigger person every single time." We ordered pizza, watched 3 episodes of a show about messy families that hit too close but made us laugh anyway, and around midnight, when the rain had eased to a drizzle, I pulled out my phone and opened a new note titled, Rules for Going Forward. I typed slowly, the glow lighting my face in the dark living room. 1. No more automatic yes to fixing Emily's problems at my expense. 2. Tell parents when something hurts instead of swallowing it. 3. Ask for what I need: time, attention, celebration, without waiting to be offered. 4. Transparency. If they make a decision that affects me, they tell me before it's final. 5. I get to set boundaries without being the villain. Mia read over my shoulder, squeezed my arm, and said, "Send that to them tomorrow. Not tonight. Tonight is for breathing." I didn't send it yet, but having the words on the screen felt like drawing a line in the sand I could stand behind. When I finally crawled into the pull-out couch around 2, phone on silent, I slept deeper than I had in weeks, the rain a soft white noise outside the skylight. No footsteps in the hall to wake me wondering who was crying or pacing or shutting down. Morning came with weak sunlight filtering through the curtains, the smell of coffee brewing downstairs where Mia's mom was humming along to oldies on the radio, and for a few minutes I just lay there, letting the normalcy of someone else's house wash over me. No tension in the air, no careful footsteps, no one's mood dictating the volume of the day. I texted Mom a quick, "Made it home safe last night, back later today," and she replied almost instantly, "Glad you got some rest. We're here when you're ready." No pressure, no Emily update, just acknowledgement, and it loosened something in my chest I hadn't realized was knotted. On the drive back, I rehearsed the conversation in my head, not an ultimatum, but a clear statement. I love Emily, I want her to get better, but I need to exist too, fully, without apology. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked the same faded blue shutters, same basketball hoop with a net half torn from last winter's storm, but I felt different, steadier, like I'd borrowed some of Mia's certainty for the day. I left my bag in the car, walked inside, and found Mom at the kitchen table with her laptop, working on lesson plans for her 3rd grade class. She looked up, smiled small but real, and said, "Coffee's still hot." I poured a mug, sat across from her, and after a sip said, "I need to talk about some rules. Not for Emily, for all of us." She closed the laptop without hesitation, folded her hands, and listened as I read from the note on my phone, voice steady even when it wavered. When I finished, she didn't argue, didn't defend. She just nodded once, eyes shiny, and said, "You're right. We've been reacting instead of planning. Let's make it official. Write them down, print them if we have to. No more assumptions." Upstairs, Emily's music was playing softly, the door still closed, but the sound didn't grate today. It felt like background noise instead of a barrier. I didn't knock, didn't force contact, those steps would come later, but I felt the first real breath of space I'd claimed for myself, fragile and new, like the first green shoot after a long freeze. And as the afternoon rain started up again, I sat on the porch steps with my coffee gone cold, watching water pool in the driveway, letting the quiet hope settle in that maybe, with enough distance and enough honesty, we could rebuild something that held room for every one of us without anyone having to disappear. The first therapy appointment felt less like a step forward and more like walking into a room where the floor might give way at any moment. The waiting area smelling faintly of lavender diffusers and old magazines, soft jazz playing low enough that it almost disappeared, and I sat there clutching my phone like a lifeline, thumbing through the same 3 texts from Mia. "You got this, call me after, proud of you," while the clock on the wall ticked past 4:02, then 4:05, each second stretching thin. When the door finally opened and Dr. Patel called my name, her voice calm and unhurried, I stood on legs that felt borrowed, followed her into the small office with the gray couch, the box of tissues on the side table, the single potted plant that looked like it had seen better decades. She didn't start with questions about Emily or the canceled party. She asked how the week had been since I'd made those rules with Mom, and I surprised myself by answering honestly, about the quiet dinners where I spoke more than I had in months, about texting Dad a quick "thanks for listening" after he'd nodded through my list without arguing, about the way Emily still avoided eye contact in the hallway but hadn't slammed her door as hard lately. Dr. Patel listened without interrupting, her pen resting on her notepad instead of scratching notes, and when I ran out of words, she said gently, "It sounds like you're starting to claim space without needing to take it from anyone else. That's huge." The word huge landed soft but solid, and for the first time in weeks, the ache in my chest eased a fraction. Not gone, but less jagged. We talked about guilt next, the kind that crept in when I caught myself resenting Emily's closed door, the way it felt selfish to want my own birthday back, and she asked me to name one small thing I could do just for me that week, no justification required. I thought of the concert tickets Mia had mentioned, some indie band playing downtown next Friday, seats in the back where I could disappear into the crowd if I needed to. "Go," Dr. Patel said simply. "Buy them today. Let it be yours." When the hour ended, I left the office lighter, the late afternoon sun slanting gold across the parking lot, and on the drive home, I called the ticket site from the Bluetooth, fingers tapping the wheel to the hold music, until the confirmation email pinged in. 2 tickets, one for me, one for whoever wanted to come. No pressure. At home, the kitchen smelled like garlic and onions. Mom was stirring spaghetti sauce, sleeves rolled up, hair escaping her ponytail, and when I walked in, she looked up, eyes searching mine the way she did now, waiting for permission to ask how it went. "It was okay," I said, setting my keys on the counter. "Good, actually. I think I'll keep going." She smiled, small but real, and handed me a wooden spoon to taste the sauce. Too much basil, we both agreed, laughing a little at how predictable that was. And for those few minutes, the old rhythm flickered back, easy and familiar, before the weight of everything settled again. Emily came down for dinner that night, which she hadn't done consistently since the cancellation. She slid into her chair quietly, hair in a loose braid, phone left upstairs for once, and when Mom passed the garlic bread, she murmured a soft thanks that sounded almost normal. I didn't push conversation, didn't fill the silence with forced cheer, just ate and watched her pick at her plate, noticing the way her shoulders weren't quite as hunched, the way she glanced at me once, quick, uncertain, before dropping her eyes to her fork. After we cleared the table, I lingered in the kitchen while Mom loaded the dishwasher, drying the pots she handed me, and when the last one was put away, I said, low enough that it wouldn't carry upstairs, I'm going to a concert next week. Just me and maybe a friend. Thought you should know. She paused, sponge dripping in her hand, then nodded. That sounds nice. You deserve something fun. No questions about who was going, no subtle probe about whether Emily might want to tag along, just acceptance, and it felt like the first real bridge we'd built since the rules talk. Later, in my room, I opened my laptop and searched for small gestures, stupid things like ways to show someone you're thinking of them without crowding them, and ended up ordering a tiny succulent online, the kind that didn't need much care, perfect for a windowsill, addressed to Emily with no note, just the plant and a plain card that said, for your room. Take care of it if you want. I hit purchase before I could overthink it, heart thudding like I'd done something reckless instead of something small and kind. The package arrived 3 days later. I left it outside her door with the rest of the mail, no fanfare, and that evening I heard her door open, the soft rustle of paper, then nothing for a long time. Around 10, my phone buzzed, a single text from her number, the first in weeks, a photo of the succulent on her desk, sunlight hitting the leaves just right, and below it, one word, thanks. No emoji, no explanation, just that. But it sat in my chest warm and unfamiliar, like the first sip of coffee after too many cold mornings. I didn't reply right away. I let it breathe, let the small vulnerability settle between us without demanding more. The rest of the week passed in quiet increments, individual therapy becoming a standing Wednesday appointment, me buying those concert tickets and inviting Mia, who said yes before I finished asking, Mom starting to share snippets of her own day instead of only asking about mine, Dad texting me a dumb dad joke meme at lunch like he used to when I was in middle school. Emily still kept mostly to her room, still wore her headphones like armor, but once I caught her in the living room flipping through channels while I made popcorn for movie night with myself, and when I offered her the bowl, she took a handful without speaking, our fingers brushing for half a second, the contact so brief it might have been accidental, but felt deliberate, a tentative thread reconnecting. I didn't push, I just sat on the other end of the couch, volume low, letting the movie fill the space between us, and when it ended, she stood, murmured, night, and left, but the door to her room closed softer than usual. Each of these moments felt fragile, like frost on a window that could melt with one wrong breath, but they were happening. Small acts of showing up without forcing closeness, of letting silence be companionable instead of hostile, and in the quiet spaces between them, I started to feel the first faint stirrings of trust, not the blind kind we had before, but something harder earned, built on the knowledge that I could ask for what I needed and still leave room for her to heal in her own time. The waiting room at the family therapist's office felt smaller than Dr. Patel's individual space, the chairs arranged in a loose semicircle instead of facing each other across a desk, a low coffee table between us holding a box of tissues and a plastic plant that looked convincingly real until you noticed the dust on the leaves. And I arrived first, heart thudding so hard I could feel it in my fingertips as I picked at the frayed seam of my jeans, the same ones I'd worn to the concert last week where the music had drowned out everything for 3 glorious hours. Mom and Dad came in next, Mom smoothing her cardigan like it was armor, Dad carrying 2 paper cups of waiting room coffee that smelled burnt even from across the room. They sat on either side of me, without speaking, the 3 of us forming a silent front row until the door opened again and Emily stepped in behind Dr. Nguyen, who introduced herself with a calm handshake and a quiet, "Thank you for being here." Emily looked smaller than usual, hoodie sleeves pulled over her hands, hair falling forward to curtain her face, and she chose the chair farthest from me, knees drawn up, eyes fixed on the carpet pattern like it held the answers we'd all come looking for. Dr. Nguyen started slow, explaining the ground rules, no interrupting, no fixing each other's feelings, just space to say what needed saying, and then asked each of us, one at a time, to name one thing we hoped to get from these sessions. Dad went first, voice steady but low. I want us to stop walking on eggshells. I want to know how to help without making it worse. Mom's turn came next, her fingers twisting together. I want to stop feeling like I'm always choosing between my daughters. I want both of you to feel safe here. When it reached me, I swallowed hard, the words I'd rehearsed in the car suddenly feeling too big. I want to feel like my hurt matters, without it being a threat to Emily's progress. I want us to be able to talk about hard things, without someone disappearing upstairs. Emily was last. She stayed quiet so long the room began to hum with the weight of her silence. Then finally, in a voice barely above a whisper, I want to stop feeling like everything I do breaks the family. The The sentence landed like a stone in still water, ripples spreading outward, and for the first time, I saw her not as the reason everything had gone wrong, but as someone carrying her own version of the same fear, that her pain was too heavy, too loud, too much. Dr. Nguyen nodded, letting the words settle, then gently steered us toward the deeper layers, the patterns we'd fallen into without noticing. Mom admitted she'd started measuring every decision by how it might affect Emily's anxiety, sidelining my milestones in the process because they felt safer to postpone. Dad confessed he'd retreated into work and silence because he didn't know how to bridge the gap between us without picking sides. I spoke about the resentment that had built like plaque, how every time Emily's needs came first, I felt myself shrinking, how the canceled party had been the breaking point, but not the beginning. When it was Emily's turn again, she surprised us all by looking straight at me for the first time in weeks. "I didn't want your party canceled," she said, cracking on the last word. "I just couldn't breathe, thinking about all those people in the house, watching me, waiting for me to act normal. I told Mom I'd be okay if we kept it small, but then she said the therapist thought no gathering at all, and I didn't fight it because I was scared if I did, I'd make it worse." Her eyes filled, but she didn't look away. "I hate that I took your 18th from you. I hate that you hate me now." The room went so still I could hear the faint tick of the wall clock. I opened my mouth, closed it, tried again. "I don't hate you," I said, finally, the truth of it settling heavy and real. I was angry, really angry, but mostly I was scared that this is how it'll always be. You hurting, me waiting my turn that never comes. Tears slipped down her cheeks then, silent and fast, and she wiped them with her sleeve, but she kept looking at me, and in that shared gaze, something shifted. Not healed, but acknowledged. Dr. Nguyen asked if anyone wanted to try something small right then, a gesture of connection. And after a long pause, I extended my hand across the space between our chairs, palm up, no demand in it, just an offer. Emily stared at it like it might burn her, then slowly, trembling, placed her fingertips against mine, not quite holding, but touching, the contact so light it was almost nothing and everything at once. We stayed like that for maybe 10 seconds, skin to skin, breathing in the same air, and when she pulled back, her hand lingered a fraction longer before retreating. The session ended soon after, no grand resolutions, just homework. One small daily check-in text between each of us. Nothing heavy, just a "how are you?" or a photo of something ordinary. In the parking lot afterwards, the four of us stood by the cars, rain starting again in soft spatters, and Mom suggested we stop for ice cream on the way home. Nothing fancy, just the drive-thru with the good soft serve. Emily nodded first, a tiny movement, and I said, "Sure, why not?" And we piled into Dad's SUV instead of splitting up, the leather seats cold against our backs, the radio tuned low to some oldie station no one bothered to change. At the window, I ordered my usual chocolate-dipped cone. Emily got vanilla with rainbow sprinkles, like she used to when we were little, and when she handed it me, our fingers brushed again, deliberate this time, a quiet echo of what happened in the office. We ate in the car in the parking lot, windows fogging, the rain tapping the roof like patient fingers, and though no one spoke much, the silence felt different, less like a wall, more like a pause we were all choosing together. Later that night, after showers and pajamas, I heard her door open down the hall, soft footsteps, then a knock on mine so quiet I almost missed it. I opened the door, and there she was, holding the succulent I'd sent her weeks ago, now with a new tiny leaf unfurling. "It's growing," she said simply, and set it on my windowsill next to my lamp. I nodded, throat tight. "Looks happy." She lingered in the doorway a moment longer, then turned to go, but paused. "Night, Alex." "Night, Em." The door closed softly behind her, and I stood there staring at the plant, its small green promise glowing under the light, feeling the first real warmth of something like trust creeping back. Not the easy, automatic kind from childhood, but a careful adult version, built on the knowledge that we'd both been hurting, both been afraid, and that maybe, if we kept showing up in these small, scary ways, we could learn to hold space for each other's pain without one of us having to vanish. The family cabin weekend was Mom's idea, proposed quietly over breakfast the Monday after our first joint session, her voice careful but determined as she set down plates of scrambled eggs and toast. A long weekend at the lake house 2 hours north, the one Grandpa left us that we hadn't used since before Emily's anxiety got so bad. Just the four of us, no phones on the first day, no agenda beyond being together in the same space without the usual walls of school and work and closed doors. I almost said no. The thought of being trapped in the woods with everyone's raw edges still showing made my stomach twist. But Dr. Nguyen had suggested testing small exposures to closeness, and something in Emily's quick glance across the table, hopeful and terrified at once, stopped the refusal in my throat. So we packed on Friday after school. Coolers with sandwiches and fruit, board games we hadn't touched in years, rain jackets because the forecast promised drizzle turning to steady rain by Saturday night, and I slipped the succulent Emily had returned to my windowsill into a cardboard box lined with bubble wrap, tucking it between sweatshirts like it was fragile cargo. The drive up was mostly quiet, Dad humming along to classic rock on the old radio, Mom navigating with the paper map she still preferred over GPS, Emily in the back seat beside me staring out at the blurring trees, her knee occasionally brushing mine when the car hit a bump and neither of us pulled away. When we arrived, the cabin smelled of pine and last year's wood smoke, dust motes dancing in the slanted afternoon light through the big windows overlooking the lake that looked more gray than blue under the heavy clouds. We unpacked in the familiar rhythm, Dad starting a fire in the stone hearth, Mom cleaning the kitchen to heat soup from a can because no one wanted to cook yet, Emily and I carrying bags upstairs to the two small bedrooms connected by a shared bathroom. She hesitated in the doorway of the one we used to share as kids, bunk beds still there with the faded quilt Mom had sewed when we were little, and I said, "You can have the bottom if you want," keeping my tone neutral. She nodded, set her duffel down, and for the first time in months, we were sleeping in the same room again, the creak of the springs under her weight a small, startling sound of return. Dinner was soup and grilled cheese around the scarred oak table, the fire crackling, rain starting to patter on the metal roof like hesitant fingers. And after we ate, Dad pulled out Monopoly from the closet shelf, the box edges worn soft from years of use. We played slowly, no one rushing turns, laughing when Dad landed on Boardwalk 3 times in a row and groaned theatrically, Mom quietly bankrupting him with hotels, while Emily and I traded properties back and forth like old allies. At one point, Emily landed on my Illinois Avenue, hesitated, then said softly, "Can I pay you in hugs instead of cash?" It was half joke, half question, her cheeks pink in the firelight, and I felt my own face warm as I answered, "Deal," extending my arms across the table. She leaned in, awkward and quick, the hug lasting maybe 5 seconds, her hair smelling like the same strawberry shampoo she'd used forever, and when she pulled back, we both looked away fast, but the air in the room felt looser, like a knot had slipped free. Saturday brought steady rain, so we stayed inside. Puzzles spread on the coffee table, old photo albums dragged out from under the couch, the kind filled with pictures of us gap-toothed and sunburned on the dock, building sandcastles that the lake always washed away. One album had a shot of Emily at 6, clinging to my back while I piggybacked her across the yard, both of us laughing so hard our faces were blurry. And when we reached that page, she traced the edge of the photo with her finger, voice barely audible over the rain. "I used to think you were invincible." I swallowed. "I thought the same about you. Still do, sometimes." She looked up then, eyes shiny. "I'm not. I break things." "So do I said. "We're both breakable. That's why we need each other to hold the pieces sometimes." Mom, sitting cross-legged on the rug, sorting loose photos, wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and didn't try to hide it. Dad cleared his throat and pretended to study the puzzle box. That night, the power flickered during a storm surge, plunging the cabin into dark except for the fire and our phone flashlights. And instead of retreating to separate corners, we stayed in the living room, blankets piled around us, telling stories, stupid kid memories, embarrassing middle school moments, the time Emily and I snuck out to the dock at midnight to watch shooting stars and ended up falling asleep there until dawn. Emily spoke more than usual, her voice steadier in the dark, admitting how the noise of crowds made her feel like she was dissolving, how she'd started pulling away because staying close felt like risking hurting me more. I told her about the nights I'd cried into my pillow after the party cancellation, how I'd worried she didn't care, and she whispered back, "I cared so much it paralyzed me." The honesty felt dangerous and necessary, each confession a small release of pressure that had built for too long. When the power came back on around 1, we didn't move right away. Emily's head had ended up on my shoulder, her breathing even, and I didn't shift, letting the warmth of her there settle something deep inside me. Sunday morning, the rain stopped, the lake flat and silver under a pale sun, and we walked the short trail to the water's edge, coats zipped against the chill, footsteps crunching on wet leaves. At the dock, Emily stopped, looked out at the still surface, then reached for my hand, fingers cold, grip tentative but real, and I laced mine through hers without hesitation. We stood like that, side by side, watching a heron lift off from the reeds, wings slow and deliberate, while Mom and Dad hung back a few paces, giving us the moment. No one spoke. We didn't need to. The forgiveness wasn't a single event, no dramatic declaration or tears in the rain, just this quiet accumulation of touches, words, shared silences that rebuilt the bridge plank by plank. On the drive home that afternoon, Emily asleep against my shoulder again, the radio playing soft acoustic covers, I felt the scar tissue of the past year knitting together, not erasing the hurt, but strengthening around it, making space for both our pains to coexist without one swallowing the other. When we pulled into the driveway that afternoon, the house lights glowed warm against the dusk, and as we carried bags inside, I caught Emily's eye across the trunk. She gave a small, real smile, the kind that reached her eyes, and I smiled back, the gesture simple and enormous, a promise that whatever came next, we'd face it together. Not perfectly, not without stumbles, but no longer apart. 1 year later, almost to the day, the kitchen smelled of fresh coffee and cinnamon from the rolls Mom had pulled from the oven at dawn, the kind she only made on quiet Sundays when no one had anywhere urgent to be. And I stood at the counter pouring my second mug while sunlight slanted through the window over the sink, catching dust motes in lazy spirals and warming the granite where my elbows rested. The house felt different now, not transformed into some glossy magazine version of perfect, but settled, like a room that had finally stopped shifting underfoot after too many earthquakes. Emily was already at the table, legs tucked under her, scrolling through college application essays on her laptop, her hair pulled into the loose ponytail she favored these days, the one that let strands escape and frame her face softer than before. She looked up when I set a plate of cinnamon roll in front of her without asking, murmured thanks in that quiet voice that had become her default again, and pushed the laptop aside to make room. Dad shuffled in next, still in his weekend flannel, carrying the newspaper he insisted on reading in print even though we all teased him about it, and Mom followed with the coffee pot, topping off everyone's mugs before sitting down herself. No one spoke right away. We just ate. The soft clink of forks against plates, the occasional rustle of pages, the low hum of the refrigerator in the background. Ordinary sounds that once felt loaded with unspoken tension, but now carried only the gentle weight of routine. It was Emily who broke the quiet first, closing her laptop with a soft click. 1 year ago today, she said, not looking at anyone in particular, just stating the fact like it was weather. The party that wasn't. The words hung there, not accusatory, not heavy with guilt anymore, just acknowledged. I nodded, took a slow sip of coffee to steady the small flutter in my chest. Yeah, the day everything cracked open. Mom's hand paused mid-reach for the creamer, eyes flicking between us, but she didn't jump in to smooth or redirect. She'd learned over months of joint sessions and individual check-ins that sometimes the best help was staying silent and letting us navigate the moment ourselves. Dad folded the newspaper carefully, set it aside. We almost lost each other that weekend, he said, voice low and rough around the edges the way it got when he was being honest instead of practical. Not in a dramatic way, just drifted so far we forgot how to reach back. Emily traced the edge of her plate with her finger, following the cinnamon swirl. I still think about how close I came to letting my fears swallow your birthday. Swallow you. She looked at me then, really looked, eyes clear and steady. No curtain of hair, no averted gaze. I'm sorry again, not because I have to keep saying it, but because I mean it every time. I felt the old ache stir, faint now, more memory than fresh wound. I know, I said, and I'm sorry for the months I treated you like the enemy instead of someone who was drowning too. The apologies weren't new. We'd said versions of them in therapy, in late-night hallway talks, and texts when one of us couldn't face saying it aloud. But saying them here, in the everyday light of a Sunday kitchen, felt different. Less like repair work, more like maintenance, the kind you do on something you plan to keep using for a long time. Mom reached across the table, covered Emily's hand with hers for a second, then mine. We're not the same family we were, she said quietly. We're scar tissue now, stronger where it tore. Dad nodded, a small, private smile tugging at his mouth. And we still fight about who gets the last cinnamon roll. That got a laugh, small, real, from all of us, breaking the moment before it could turn too solemn. After breakfast, Emily and I cleared the table together, shoulders brushing as we loaded the dishwasher, a casual proximity that once would have felt forced, but now happened without thinking. Later, when the dishes were done and the house settled into its mid-morning hush, we ended up on the back porch steps, the same ones where I'd sat watching rain pool in the driveway the day I came back from Mia's, only now the sun was out, warming the concrete, and a light breeze carried the scent of cut grass from the neighbor's yard. Emily pulled her knees up, rested her chin on them. I got into the art program, she said, voice soft but steady. The one in Chicago, early acceptance. I turned to her, surprise blooming warm in my chest. Em, that's huge! She shrugged, but her eyes shined. Yeah, scary huge, but I think I can handle scary now, a little. I bumped her shoulder with mine. You've handled scarier. We both have. She nodded, then reached into her hoodie pocket and pulled out a small white envelope, plain, unsealed. Inside was a single sheet of thick paper, watercolor on one side, our old backyard tire swing, the one no one used anymore, but painted in soft greens and golds, sunlight filtering through the leaves. And on the swing sat two small figures, us, younger, laughing, mid-push, the motion blurred just enough to feel alive. Below it, in her careful lettering, for the sister who taught me how to swing without falling. Happy 19th, Alex. Love, M. I stared at it until my vision blurred, then carefully slid it back into the envelope, tucking it into my own pocket like something precious and breakable. It's perfect, I managed. Thank you. We sat there a while longer, watching clouds drift across a sky that looked impossibly wide after so many months of feeling closed in. Eventually, Mom called us in for lunch, leftover soup and fresh bread, and Dad suggested a walk later, if the weather held, maybe down to the park where we used to feed ducks when we were small. No grand gestures, no forced family photo or tearful toast, just the slow, steady accumulation of days that had rebuilt us, not back to what we were, but into something new, A family that knew how to bend without breaking, how to hold space for pain without letting it define the shape of love. When evening came and the house lights came on one by one, I stood in the doorway of Emily's room, watching her pack a small box of art supplies for college. The succulent I'd sent her still thriving on her windowsill, now joined by a few others she had propagated herself. She caught me looking, smiled that small, real smile that had become familiar again. "You staying for movie night?" "Yeah," I said. "Wouldn't miss it." And as I turned to head downstairs, the ache that once lived permanent in my chest had shrunk to a quiet scar, tender if pressed, but no longer bleeding, and in its place was something steadier, trust, hard-won and quiet, the kind that doesn't shout, but simply stays, through rain and sun and ordinary Sundays, proof that even after the worst fracture, a family could learn, slowly, painfully, beautifully, how to heal together.